So I bought a bowl. All my ingredients. And on Friday, I'm going to yeah. I'm really nervous. I'm so excited. You're gonna have to like show us how it's great. Oh my! We're in. Oh, okay, great. Hi everyone. I am so excited for you all to be here, and I know that there's a lot of competing events when it's December, so we appreciate you coming out. And as Sam said, people don't like to leave their homes, so the fact that you did makes you all winners.
For Holla.
So thank you. I am Samantha Ettus. I am an author and I'm a contributor to On Being Jewish Now, which is a book I am so proud of because it just became a USA Today bestseller for like how many weeks in a row now?
Yeah,
a lot of weeks in a row. Yeah. It's also my new favorite gift, so I bought them in bulk. And I am joined today by two incredible people, and they are Beth and Abby. They're both contributors to On Being Jewish Now, but they're also authors in their own right. They have their own books. I actually just crammed and read Beth's entire book, and I'm a little bit obsessed, so we're going to talk a lot about that. So Beth is a doctor. She's a mother of three, and she found that she wasn't, I'm not going to give away her book, but she found that she wasn't living by her own advice, and one day her friend convinced her to make her first challah. And that changed her life and set her on this course of making over 1,000 challahs. And she talks about the journey in her book. And I'm telling you, it has changed my life because on Friday I am making my first challah. And I literally bought all the ingredients today while I was reading Beth's book. So I am a little bit obsessed. And I also want to introduce you to Abby Stern. So Abby is an entertainment reporter who is also an author. She's also written a children's book. She does a bazillion things. She also knows every single piece of celebrity gossip. So if you become friends with her, she can maybe tell you a little bit of scoop. And we're just so lucky to have them with us today. So thank you all for being here. And I'm just so excited to chat with you guys. So Abby, let's start with you. So one of the things that I noticed in your chapter on Being Jewish Now. So On Being Jewish Now, if you haven't picked it up yet, has 75 contributor essays. So in your essay, you said that you were still discovering how to sort of be more Jewish.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
It's very much still a work in progress. But no, because I don't know what it is, if it's like the self-deprecating Jew thing that like we've all, or not all, but that some of us have kind of either adapted to or grown up with, or what, but like I still find myself a little resistant to some things. But then obviously on October 7th, it just kind of blew the doors off and everything changed. And I was really thinking about, I was bar mitzvah and I went to Sunday school every Sunday until I was confirmed, which I hated. And I was like, this is such a waste of day. And I see the beauty in all of that now. But it's still like in my daily life, I don't do Shabbat unless I'm invited to someone's home. But I think it's the most beautiful because I'm thinking am I a Shabbat person? Do I know? It's still very much like a piecemeal type of thing. And doing this book has been wonderful on so many levels. I'm so grateful that Zibby offered to, let me and contribute to it. I feel like such a fraud doing part of it.
Share a little bit about what happened with was it your grandmother?
Yeah.
Who you took after in terms of looks?
My grandmother lived in Poland, before in the 1940s, and she was blonde hair and blue eyed, the only one in my family. My mother actually is half Polish, half Israeli, so she has like this olive Mediterranean skin and brown hair. But so she worked in a shop. I believe it was a clothing shop. And, when things started to get bad, they had my grandmother working at the front because she looked very Aryan. And the Hitler's men would come in and they would say, is the shop owned by Jews? And she would say, nope. And they believed her because of the way she looked. So whenever I tell people that I'm Jewish, unless they hear my last name, Stern, they kind of usually look and they're like, oh, wait, did I miss a star? Did I miss like the clue? And I always wondered why I kind of didn't wear one. I was given a couple for my bat mitzvah at the time. And after October 7th, I started thinking like, oh, maybe there's like this like deeper ingrained reason, kind of like that survival and protection mechanism that maybe if I don't show that I'm Jewish. Somehow I'll have like an advantage if stuff goes down again.
Well, and
So
you grew up in New Orleans.
I did. I
which
grew up in
think
New
is
Orleans.
so different. Like Beth and I have both spent so much time in New York. You grew up in Cleveland, right? And I think that when you're growing up in New York, you're the norm. Like, you know, and so I think it's probably a very different experience to grow up in New Orleans and be Jewish.
There were 3 Reform temples and 1 conservative. So I wasn't the only one. And I actually went to Jew camp in Mississippi, believe it or not.
Wow.
Not the first place you think of when you think of like a Jewish sleepaway camp. So I wasn't totally alone. But also, yeah, you know, I also went to an Episcopal school, so we had chapel, and people were getting the wafer and the grape juice every week, which I was always very jealous of at the time. But yeah, so it was just, how am I Jewish? And how outwardly Jewish do I feel comfortable being? And do I want to push past my comfort zone? And there's still things that I'm figuring out every day and every week, and connecting with all these people, all these other authors, and everybody that comes out to these events. It's just been really helpful for me to kind of figure out where I want to fit and who I want to be as a woman, as a Jewish woman in Los Angeles. And TBD, I'll keep you guys posted.
So Beth, tell us about your experience of being Jewish. It's quite different, and I think it would be really helpful.
Yes, it is. So I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, very Reform, and my husband who's here is conservative, so it felt like we had a mixed marriage. But when I started making challah about 18 years ago, that's really when I started leaning into more of the ritual and the practice. We started having Shabbat every Friday, and it's been really an incredible journey to embrace I do wear a star now.
Yes, we all do now, right?
All right, guys,
I
fine.
know. Abby, you're next. Yes.
There's a story behind why I'm not wearing one right now, but we'll save that for another day.
Oh no, we're gonna save it for an hour from now. But anyways, but I remember Ella, who is my daughter, who's right here. I brought my kids to an LA Rams game Saturday after October 7th. And Ella was wearing a Jewish shirt, and I said, "Oh no, you have to take that off because of everything that just happened. It's too risky." And she insisted on wearing it, and we got in an argument about it. And then only a few weeks later, I realized how right she was, and I've totally gone the other direction where I have like so much jewelry that it's like absurd. But yeah, I think it's changed so many of us. But it sounds like you'd already written this book before October 7th.
The book came out. I wrote the book. It was published in 2018, the fall of 2018, and so I had just started before COVID on a book tour, and it was actually during COVID that it really took off because I started doing challah workshops virtually and working with people around the country. And what I came to realize was this is a wonderful ritual to work with people from all different backgrounds, and particularly since October 7th, I've really been leaning into actually working specifically with Jewish and non-Jewish groups. I did an event yesterday up in Santa Barbara. There were no Jews in making challah with me, and it was a really fabulous event because I had to explain a lot about where I was coming from, and they explained it.
And why did they attend this event?
I think people are. Well, everyone loves challah, so we'll just leave it there. but on a deeper level, I think really people are interested in building bridges and in building community. And now more than ever, I find that it's an olive branch to come together. And it's a stressful place. I'm an internist by training, and I see a lot of stress impacts our health. And right now it's very stressful in the world.
Well, that was one thing about your book that struck me. It was the way you talked about how disease kind of takes hold in our bodies when it sees unhealthy lifestyles. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. So I'm an internist by training, and have done a lot of work in lifestyle modification. So looking at how nutrition, exercise, and stress management impact health. And chronic disease is 75% lifestyle driven. So what we do every day actually really, really matters. Like if you had breakfast this morning, actually impacts your health. If you stopped and took a deep breath today, actually impacts your health. And we used to just say, oh, we know this, but now we actually have the data. Like now I can say on a pathophysiological level, your cells are being impacted by stress. and that's really profound. Heart disease is the #1 killer of women. I focused on women's health primarily when I was a full-time clinician, and it's still the number. I mean, it was then and during my training. I've been at this for a while, and it still is, and we have a long way to go. But having practices like making challah and embracing community and being together is an incredible way to not only just feel good in the moment, but actually to feel good in our bodies.
Well, and I think that since October 7th, I know I found in my life that a lot of people will reach out to me all the time and sort of complain about all of the relationships they've lost since October 7th, the friends that haven't contacted them or the friends that have turned their back on them or maybe posted pro-Palestinian things. And I always say, but you've made so many new friends since October 7th. I mean, I think our community, our Jewish community, has never been this strong in our lifetimes. In the diaspora, certainly. And so it's really exciting. So talk about the role of community in your lives.
I think it's exploded. I'm with you. I feel like in the last year and a half, it's really galvanized, and I see it both just in the world, and I see it in the work that I'm doing through Braided. It's actually it's a wonderful positive, actually. I think we're looking for community, and we know, I mean, there was a loneliness epidemic before the pandemic, certainly, but that exploded during the pandemic, and so now to have an antidote to that is really great.
When you first moved to Los Angeles, you created a community for yourself. How did you do that?
My children, 2 of them are here. We were really lucky. We moved here when the kids were in school, so the first community was actually through their school. But I find that LA is, having now lived in multiple cities across the country, I love LA, and I find that it's a wonderful community because people do seem more open and more engaged. It's been the easiest place for me to build community compared to every other place I've lived.
Oh, that's wonderful. And how about you, Abby?
Yeah, I went to college here, and actually not that many college friends still remain. Not in a bad way, but just kind of do your own thing and you move apart. And I think whether you're out, I'm a tennis player, so I meet a lot of people playing tennis, or it's funny, I was just talking to a friend, I was like, I've made a lot of new friends in the last couple months, just like random people that you meet out and you start up a chat. And then there is, in terms of the Jewish community, it's just been incredible. Right after October 7th, especially, I felt a little unsafe with people that weren't Jewish, which I feel horrible saying that, but it's just, I feel very, very safe when I'm around Jewish people now. And thanks to Zibby, I met so many more. And even I got an email from somebody that I work with peripherally. She was inviting me to something, and the opening sentence was like, "Hey, Abby, I know it's been a while. So cool to see you were part of On Being Jewish Now." And someone that I had no idea that would even be in their sphere. Right. So even kind of connecting you in a deeper way with people that you already are acquainted with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I look at what Zibby did with this book, there are 75 chapters for those of you who haven't read it yet. And each one is so different. I mean, your chapters, I read both of them today, and they're both just so different from one another. And I think that it's so great to see so many different perspectives on what it means to be Jewish. And you know how they say that, if a straight line in Israel, a line in Israel is a circle, because we're just all that, and we have so many opinions, and there's always, so many, if you have 5 people in the room, there's 5 different opinions. At least. And that's part of what makes us so unique and so strong in many ways. How has your community of Jewish people changed since October 7th in terms of the scope of, it used to be, for us at least, it was like more of our synagogue, but now it just seems like anyone who's Jewish is suddenly, we're like sisters and brothers. Do you feel that way?
I do, which is really nice. I feel like it's grown. I definitely feel like there's more nuance, and I'm learning how to hold different opinions, and I think we all want peace, and we all want the safety and security of Israel. How we get there necessarily is different, and so I'm having to really learn how to handle that with a bit more grace. I think when I was younger, it was so black and white, and now it's not. But I feel like they're more. I feel it's more encompassing. Like it's grown. It's lovely, actually.
How are you sort of how do you relate to the battle against anti-Semitism?
Viscerally. I made my family get second citizenship. So
In Israel?
no, actually in Europe, but no, it worries me. I mean, like you, I don't necessarily feel safe, but I actually feel safer since October 7 because it's out in the open now, actually. And I used to just think it and worry about it, and now I feel like, okay, we're all in this together, and here we go.
Right.
It actually feels more secure now. I feel more secure now. I'll own that. I feel more secure now because of the community.
And how do you feel about your children when you think about the world they're going to inherit?
Good question.
I know, it's loaded and they're sitting right there. I worried more, actually, maybe even before October 7. There's so many issues. But now I feel like they're really smart. They're smart, their friends are smart, the community they have access in a way that we didn't necessarily have ourselves when we were growing up. We didn't have social media, and whereas there's so many problems with social media, I actually think there are a lot of good things too about it. And so they have this very strong network, and I think they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Abby, what about you? How do you embed yourself in the news, or do you stay away from it? I mean, how much of a part of your daily life is the battle against anti-Semitism?
I do, and then I have to take breaks at sometimes too, because the stress, and then trying to learn those lessons before it's too late. So, I have a couple of people that I always text, pretty much daily when we see something, good or bad. And it's become a lot bigger part of my life than I ever would have anticipated, to be perfectly honest. It affects me much more deeply than I ever would have even thought. Even on October 8th, like it's deepening every day how affected I am. And I get really, this is a little bit of a segue, and I don't know if we even really want to talk about this, but I get really upset when people use the term Zionist as a slur. I just keep wanting to and I have to hold myself back. I just want to be like, have you looked at a dictionary? Do you know what the word actually means? So I see the word Zionist slung around a lot as a derogatory term, as it would be, for any ethnic group. And that really gets me, and I have to kind of get my bearings before I respond instead of react to that.
Well, I'm so glad you brought it up, because it really is sort of the newest wave of anti-Semitism. It's really easy for people to just dismiss you and say, I'm totally for the Jews, just not for Zionists. And then you say, well, it'd be like saying, I'm friends with Pakistanis, but I don't believe in Pakistan. It's literally, it just makes no sense. And I think it's so...
Well, not even that, but it's like, and they're evil. The people that are on that land are evil, and if you believe that they should live there, you're evil.
Right.
We're all equated, and it all lumped into not even the political part, but just the...
Well, and 90% of Jews are Zionists. So 90% of Jews believe Israel should exist. So you're basically saying, I only like 10% of the Jews, and they're the only ones that are okay. And they're typically the ones that are less educated and less understanding of what it really means. So I think that you have a good reason. I mean, it's unfortunate. The branding of the word Zionism is actually problematic if you think about it, because if it was just called something else, it would be very different. But it's easy to just separate it from Jews and say, oh, I'm just against Zionists.
Yeah, and you're a Zionist. Oh, you're a Zionist. Actually, I had an experience, if it's okay to share, because it was my first. I'd seen a lot of these things on social media, obviously, but I'd never experienced it. I was waiting to go into an event to do a red carpet, and it was at the El Capitan Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but Hollywood Boulevard, like a little sketch, but lots of people. So there was security, and we were waiting to go inside to be checked in and let in. And there was a guy with his phone and a camera out, and he just started screaming that everyone in the line was Zionist. I don't know what the catalyst was, because that happened as I was walking up. At one point, he started screaming, "You're baby killers, you're all Zionists, like you all deserve to die," basically. And he was really trying to agitate us. And I don't know if he wanted somebody to kind of lash out and hit him and try and sue, or if he just wanted a reaction from us. But I just in my daily life, I hadn't encountered that type of energy in person with someone. He literally put his phone in my face. He goes, "What do you think about Zionists? What do you think about Israel?" And I had the most restraint I've ever had in my life, because those people that know me know that I am not good at being restrained. I just turned my face to the other side. And then as soon as he kind of got a little bit away from me, I went up to the front and I was like, "Y'all go listen now. Like, this guy's unhinged and I feel very unsafe," and everybody. But that was my first real, like, somebody in your face, like, calling you a Zion. Just the amount of hate that he was spewing was just
No, that's
crazy.
traumatic.
It was a lot. And it just happened on Friday night. So
wow, I'm so
that
sorry.
it was a good lesson, and it was a good
lesson.
a good lesson to just like hold my composure. And because what if I said facts to him, it wouldn't have helped, and it would have just made me look crazy, and who knows, it could have agitated him more, and maybe he was an unsafe person or had a weapon or who knows. That's the point. He just probably wanted attention at the end of the day, but it was hurtful. It was more hurtful than I thought it would be, hearing like an unhinged stranger screaming at you that you're a baby killer.
I think that would be upsetting for anyone if there was anything. That's really upsetting. Now might be a good time for you to share the story of why you don't wear a Jewish scarf.
Oh my gosh, it's not even related, so it's not even good. It was just, I just had a very big expense come up. So, and I picked out the star I want from 14 Carats, the little pave diamond one. So I was just like, you know what? So I was like, you know what? Like, let's just like hold off until 2025 and like after you get paid that big credit card bill. It was a necessary thing. It wasn't like a big like frivolous purchase. But you know, after you see that go through when your credit card company calls you and they're like, "Did you authorize this?" And you're like, "Unfortunately, yes." So I decided I was going to hold off, but I want that specific
Okay,
one.
well, we're all rooting to see a photograph with your Jewish star. Yes.
So that's why it's not a.
And when was the last time that both of you were in Israel?
I haven't been since 2017, but I'm hoping to go in the spring.
Well, it was a story in your book of you making challah in Israel,
yes.
right?
Yes, that was the trip before that. I got to go with a group of women to Israel, and we made challah with a Rebbitzin, and I got to learn the whole history. It was really magical.
Wow.
Yeah, that was fun.
So you sort of accidentally connected with your Judaism in a sense through the challah.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It's a combination. It was through the challah, and then also just having children, and through parenting, and kind of leaning into the Jewish principles, sort of wrapped around parenting as well. So they came along together.
And what made you turn it into a book?
I had learned so many lessons, and I wanted to share them. And I don't know if it's the physician in me, and I'm just always have an answer to like, "Oh, well, you need something, let me help." Or if it's just, I wanted to share this because there's so many great lessons, from the sublime to the ridiculous. When you proof yeast, you have to wait, and you have to have patience, and I don't have a lot of patience. So every week I get reminded that I have to wait. And that's great. You're on the 405 and you're stuck in traffic, and maybe you remember because you just made challah that it's okay, you have to wait. You know, as an example.
I was actually wondering, when you're making the challah and you're waiting for the yeast, and are you like listening to a podcast, or you're just literally totally just like completely present?
No, I am not completely present.
Okay.
Full spirit of, you know, I usually start actually making the rest of the dough. But I don't, you cannot add in this recipe, which is a very simple recipe. It's in the book. It's from a mommy and me class from the JCC in Manhattan for 2 and 3-year-olds. So I guarantee you all can make this. But it's not a recipe where you take the big bowl and you add the yeast and the water and the flour and you just go. You have to do the yeast separate, and that takes about 10 minutes. So I don't wait just the 10 minutes and do nothing. I actually start making the dough because I'm not that patient. But you could do.
But when you are making it, like I know it sounds really specific, but when you are making it, are you listening to something? Or are you talking on the phone? Or are you literally just totally present?
Well, I'm present because I learned actually in Israel when I made challah with this Rebbitzin, we learned the coolest thing, this idea of intention. And so I talk a lot about this, particularly when I give the workshops, because I think doing something with intention is incredibly powerful. And when you set your intentions, when you say them out loud, it's even more powerful, because it's really easy to keep things, between our ears, and then nothing maybe happens. So at the beginning, once I've set out the ingredients, and I'm set to go, I stop. And I do say out loud, in whose merit I'm going to make the challah. When our kids were little and they maybe studied for a math test, it was that. Now, every week, without fail, I start by making it in the merit of the hostages. And then I think about maybe who's not well in our community, because we have some friends who are sick. And then maybe it's something else. This week it was really fun to listen to at another workshop I was doing, from the gamut. It runs, one of the participants was making in the merit of her sister who just was pregnant for the first time. And another participant who was a visiting grandmother from the Middle East actually was making in the merit just for peace. And then somebody else was making in the merit of their child who's applying to college, and it's December, so it's college season. I mean, it can be all of these things, but it brings you in right there. And then, yes, you're thinking about that as you're making the challah. And then when I'm kneading the dough, I'm present again thinking about it. So it is a process, which is really nice to get me right there. You can't be on your phone. Back in the day, I couldn't be worrying about answering a beeper or worrying about my patients. Hi. I just was making dough, which is great.
I love it. And it's so inspiring. So you guys, I'm totally changing my life. I'm making a challah on Friday for the first time. These are my thumbs. And every week I'll be making a challah from now on.
I love it.
This book has changed me. I'm so excited about it. Yeah, I know. I'm so excited. So for me and my own experience, I was a women's empowerment focused professional before October 7th. And on October 7th, my son was bar mitzvahed. And we didn't understand the gravity of what had happened on that day until the next day. It really didn't fully hit us. And the next day, when I would have been posting cute pictures of his bar mitzvah, it felt so frivolous. And so I just started posting about what was going on in the Middle East, thinking when the grown-ups show up, I'll go back to my regularly scheduled programming. And they never showed up. And so I just continued to try to be sort of a news source of true news for people every day since. And what I learned from October 7th is that on a dime, you can sort of pivot not just your community, but your entire mentality about what it is, your purpose and what you need to be doing. And so I'm just wondering, in your daily lives, how has your purpose changed since October 7th?
You want to start? You want me to start?
I'd like you to start.
Okay.
I need to think of
Okay. I was thinking prior to October 7th, but in and around that time, of maybe doing more medical. Going back to, I see patients one day a week now, and doing more. And then I realized post October 7th, the value of the workshops that I do based on the book are an opportunity to build a bridge and to really lean into working with people of multiple faiths. And I think we need that now. It became very apparent post October 7th, those who understood and those who didn't. And this is something I can do. It's sort of my tikkun olam to try and heal the world a little bit. So I'm all in.
That's awesome. Now, how does it impact your practice? Because when you see patients from all different ilks and walks of life. Do they ever comment on our Jewish Star? Do they, talk about October 7th?
No one has. Although I must admit, this is a newish thing. Maybe 2 months. Is this 2 months, Mia?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not that old for me to be wearing this. They don't comment on it. The staff know that I'm Jewish. They know I make challah. They know about the book. They know I'm not there if I'm off doing a workshop. But it's more that I try and bring in the lifestyle piece more with patients than anything. I'm just really trying to focus on stress management and having healthy behavior. And then I might throw in as an example, and I make challah, and off we go. But that's not really.
Yeah. And how about you, Abby?
It was totally in the spirit of transparency. I don't think my daily life has necessarily changed. And certainly, I see you on Instagram and on a couple of other people that I've followed since October 7th. And I see, I'm like, oh, y'all you're fighting the good fight. You're doing the good work and you're so out there. doing it. And I think for me, it's on more of like a one-on-one personal connection level. Maybe somebody that is not quite on the other side, but isn't quite on our side. Maybe it's just having some conversations or telling them something is hurtful that they might not have realized, or what it really means, or how we interpret those sayings, and that they're not just empty words or a slogan. I would just say it's on a much more personal one-on-one level with me. And, I got to figure out where I am with the being Jewish first, and then I think the level of the actual activism.
Everyone here has Shabbat dinners. Please invite Abby. Turn her into a Shabbat host eventually.
Yes. No, it's not that I'm against it. It's just never been like, it's funny. My mom actually read the book while she was out here helping me last week. And she was like, I really liked your essay. You weren't trying to pretend that you were anything that you were. And I'm comfortable with that too. I don't want to pretend that I'm an activist in the way that you are. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I admire you. But I just want to be myself in whatever way
Well,
that
I liked
is.
that you were evolving, because I think a lot of people will read your chapter and think they identify with that. Because I think a lot of people don't yet know how they feel and are constantly changing their relationship to their ethno-religion and figuring that out. So I think it's really great. I mean, I think that's one of the beautiful things about having an anthology, is that you have so many perspectives. I don't know if you all have done a lot of the events for On Being Jewish Now, but it's always a different combination of us. And I've learned so much from the other contributors, because I think we're all coming at it from such different perspectives. And I love that.
I was reading today, actually, going back and reading some, and I was reading Anna and Amy Efron's A Mother and Daughter, which how cool is that we have that. And they're just so diametrically opposed, the essays, and it's so fun to see that.
It's really fun. And Beth, one of the things that my book, and I wrote my book the same year you did, so it seems like a long time ago, but yours is incredibly relevant today because of what happened October 7th. Did your book have new life to it? Did you find that your book suddenly came back into extreme relevance? Because books have a shelf life.
They do, but luckily for me, this is a bit of an evergreen book, because the topic is one that continues to resonate.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
Yeah, it continues to sell every day. It's kind of exciting.
It's awesome. Well, when I did the Pie Life, which is my book, and it's all about how to balance your life professionally and personally at the same time, when I look back at it now, there's parts of it that are slightly dated. And the biggest part of it that seems dated to me is the piece about community. Because in my book, it was like there were 7 slices of your life, and those are still the 7 slices that we all have. They're your career, your health, your friends, your family, your relationship, your community, and your hobbies. But religion was just sort of tucked into community, and it wasn't a big presence. And when I would give talks, it wasn't a big feature. And now for so many of us, it's become such a big slice of our life that wasn't there. How have the slices of your lives changed, do you think, in the last year or two?
I think they're actually more connected now, as opposed to being siloed. I think there's a real, because the work I do is now in the Jewish space more, some of those slices have come together, which is kind of nice, actually.
So they overlap more.
Yeah, I like that.
I think the community has taken a bigger part for me. Just, you're talking about how things can just turn on a dime, and just realizing how important connection is. And, if you're on your deathbed, 99% of the other things are not going to matter. So just making that a bigger part of my life.
Well, I want to make sure that all of you have a chance to ask any questions or engage these amazing people in conversation too.
Don't forget we have a challah to gift to someone. To give away, right?
Yes, we have an extra.
Oh,
we're gonna
yeah.
raffle.
It's a raffle.
I know. So we were thinking we would ask who's made challah. Maybe that one.
1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, so that's-
okay.
Maybe we need a different.
Maybe it should
criteria.
be the first person to ask a question.
Okay.
I already have this question all queued up, so very interested. How do you balance? I guess like everyone has a different answer to this, and my dance around this changes every day, but how do you balance when it comes to anti-Semitism or like anti-Israel sentiment or whatever it is that you come across? How do you balance like fighting it and trying to educate people and like taking that sort of approach versus like accepting it and kind of making peace with it and understanding that like you can't change the world and you can't change thousands of years of history? I guess like how do you balance those two things?
That's the question. I mean, that's the question. It's really tough. I've really been struggling with that. I think we have to stand up. We have to speak out. I mean, that's why I was so excited when Zibby asked me to participate in this book, and I had the opportunity to do that. It's exhausting because it's so much easier. To your point, it's thousands of years. Like it's. But on the other hand, if we don't speak up, so I just. That guides me. We have to speak up.
I have a slightly different take because I'm sort of in the fight every day. And one of the things I like to share with people is that you have to have closed pores to do the fighting, right? So if we all have friends who you'll say, how are you? And they're like, oh my God, well, the news in the world is so horrible. How could I be okay? And when we say to someone, how are you? We really mean, how are you and your family? We don't mean, how are you given the craziness in the world? And I think it's so important for all of us to set those boundaries for ourselves. So how are you is different than how are you versus what's going on in the world. And so for me, it's like I couldn't do this work unless I have closed pores about it. So if I let every atrocity or worrying about every hostage get into my body and my soul, I couldn't ever do the fighting and do all of it. But obviously not everyone has a social media platform, and not everyone has a social media platform that they're willing to devote to this. But I really do think that every single one of us can make a difference, even in small ways. So if your kid's school sends something out that is just not acceptable language or whatever, taking that on as your battle is just as important as some of the other things. It's so imperative that each one of us says something when we see anything, because it makes all of our jobs easier when that happens. Every one of us is so important. And I think that, we talk so much about branding, and a lot of people you'll hear complain that Israel's terrible at branding and messaging. I took a group of celebrities and influencers to Israel in May, and we were lucky enough to have dinner with former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. And someone asked him this question, what do you think about the fact that Israel's so terrible with messaging and communications? And he said, you know what really helps with messaging? Winning. Winning fixes all messaging problems. And I think what we've seen recently, like Israel's winning. And so suddenly our messaging is getting so much better. And because the world likes a winner. And I think that will change a lot of things. So I think that we're all in this together. The amazing thing is that there's thousands of soldiers on the ground and hundreds of thousands of us, and we can all really make a difference. And I think that when we hear about the Holocaust repeating itself or anything like that, in Europe at that time, only 30,000 people total spoke up about any of it. And so we all have a job to do so that doesn't happen again.
I have one more point actually, to your point about the closed
Pores, yeah.
Yeah, that's such a great analogy. I'm gonna use that.
It's in my next book.
I like that. That's challah for me. So I think about, when you're on an airplane and the flight attendant talks about, make sure you put on your oxygen mask first before helping those around you. Challah is my oxygen mask. So every week I stop and take care of myself so I can take care of others. And that, to your point, also then about patients. While I may not be talking about specific anti-Semitism with my patients in this low-income clinic, we are talking about self-care a lot. And so, I believe now, where I wouldn't have said this pre-October 7th, the need to stand up, I didn't feel that way so strongly before, but now I feel it in my bones. But you're right. We have to take care of ourselves. So whether it's making challah, I mean, of course, I hope everyone makes challah, but whether it's making that or whatever, I don't actually care. But I deeply care that you have something that fills you, so that then we can, because the battle's been going for thousands of years, and unfortunately it's probably good. Or maybe it's an opportunity that, you know, we're gonna be
It's
fortunate.
actually so interesting because your work as a physician, you've also always had to have those boundaries because you can't absorb every single person's pain or you couldn't be a physician, right? And you must see so many stories and
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Can I? It's your mom. Okay, so you're talking a lot about community, which is really a beautiful thing. As a Jewish professional, I get to fly around the country month after month having Shabbat dinners with different people in different communities. And so you're talking a lot about community, and you have this big, huge community, whether it's social media or in your workshops. How are you dividing your time, or how are you able to contain your community with all of the work and distraction and all that kind of thing? Like, I know Beth and her family do Shabbat every Friday night. Like, how do you guys really keep your community tight? Because what I've learned in traveling around the country is Shabbat and that unity and community is exactly what you're talking about being, you know, kind of outward and not in a negative way. You do it in a beautiful way. It's just a beautifully intentional storytelling way. So I want to know, like, do you have time for your core community doing the work you do?
do you want to answer that? Or?
For me, it's kind of, which is the antithesis of community, but also not, keeping the people out to focus on the people that are part of that community. And I'm just very much in the place of my life where I want that core community instead of that larger community.
Mm-hmm.
So you're either aligning with that core community or not. And you know, we all have the 24 hours in the day. So I just really try and prioritize my core community, and a lot of the Jewish core community. And, you know, whether it's the quick text check-in or it's the, hey, let's get together and, you know, have a bigger, you know, gathering with more of us. To me, it's just that's how I have the time, just prioritizing.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big compartmentalizer. So I definitely have shifted my priorities in terms of which people I've invested in post October 7th. And I think that's been really meaningful. It's just to sort of be a little more, just more thoughtful about how you're spending your time and what I'm doing. And people say, well, you're so busy, but I don't feel, I mean, I am so busy, but I feel like it's a lot of hiding activities where I get to see a lot of people at once that are important to me. Or, but I also think it's really important to always have the door open for these new friendships. And I like to think of our post October 7th world as like when you're at Grand Central Station and you're waiting for your train and you see the numbers changing so fast. That's kind of how our lives have changed in terms of the people in them post October 7th. That's what I think of it.
It's a good analogy.
Ella.
Okay, so one thing my mom does every week that I look forward to every week is called Good Jewish News. And she posts it on Instagram every single week without fail. And it's anything from like this foreign power announce their support for Israel to small acts of Tikkun Olam, like you were talking about, Beth. And so I guess my question for you is like, hearing about your workshops is one of those things that's like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad this is happening. So I guess I'm curious, kind of, obviously that started way before October 7th, but are there any lessons you could share with us for kind of creating community and conversation like that on a smaller scale and like a healthy way?
That's a good question. It has been really, I think people want to come together, first of all, so I think that's helpful. Certainly food is always, there's something really powerful about making food and making bread and breaking bread. There's like something about breaking bread with people. So I find that you can do that one-on-one, you can do that with 5 people. I mean, like it doesn't matter. That can be very almost spontaneous. But I think that can also be a very powerful way to start a dialogue, to be together. I'm not sure that's where you were going with your question.
No, yeah, that pretty much is. I'm also curious, like, have any issues ever come up in that dialogue? Like you said, you've encountered a lot of kind of different takes on this now. It's less black and white.
Pre-October 7, I would say the most conversation was around, when I was doing this around George Floyd and during that time. And then obviously since it's been trying to either be purposely with a Jewish community or to, and in which case it's just almost more of a just like holding space together. When it's not just with the Jewish community, then it's really lovely to share some of what we are in a very sort of non high stakes, like very sort of comforting way. But it's also a great time then to learn with, like, one of the women yesterday at this event that I was at, there were no Jews at this event, as it turned out. And one of them makes a bread very similar to challah every Easter. And I'd heard about this because I grew up with a friend who actually does this too. It's the only two people I know who do. There's a bread, maybe you all know, I didn't know, but there's a bread you have at Easter that is very, very similar to challah. So we were discussing that, and she does a special braid with it, and so we got into this fun conversation because sometimes she puts something in it. So then I started talking about the shlisel challah that you make after Passover, and so it was this really fun exchange of different cultures about the same time around Easter, Passover, that I never would have had if we hadn't been in that type of environment. So that was kind of fun. And now she's going to go home and make challah, and she's, as I said, not Jewish. So I think that's pretty cool.
Anyone else?
I'd just like to make a comment. I just want to thank all of you for using your voices and your platforms. I think that the world really took its mask off following October 7th. And I, like so many of you and people in this room, were just, I think, shocked at the quick realignment of people that we thought were friends and thought were part of our community. Suddenly were turning against us and criticizing us, and long-term friendships and relationships suddenly turned just hateful within a matter of, it seemed to me, a couple of news cycles. So I just really appreciate what you said about the small little things that you can do to kind of help empower the community, whether it's a conversation like this, or making challah, or breaking bread, or posting on social media, or anything that you can do. I think every little bit helps. So just want to thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys so much for being here. We have books up here. If anybody still needs their copy of Braided or I'm Being Jewish Now, we have both of your books as well, and I'm sure they'll happily sign them for you. They make really good Hanukkah Christmas gifts. So thank you guys all so much.
Thank you.